Okay, good evening, brothers and sisters. For our suggested AGM topic for the month of June, this is finding God in everyday situations. So, this is part of the intrapersonal formation teaching series um, on our formation track, on our teaching track. So, this is a practical, this will involve a practical application of the teaching and which we encourage you to discuss during your action group meeting. So finding God in everyday situations. We start with the call. This is a story of Zacchaeus and Jesus found on Luke 19. And then we tackle briefly about the world from the early Christian times up to this time for a historical perspective. And then how would we find God in the marketplace today? And we will do that through the use of the consciousness examine or the conscious examine or daily examine method. So the call to holiness. So previously, there's this popular belief that holiness is only for the religious and the priests, no? And there is a need for us to be holy. We need to escape the fallen world to find God. And guidance is needed by everyone, but it's only available to the religious and the priests. So, ito bang tatlong ito ay ito ba ay tama pa rin? Ito ba ang ibig sabihin ng pagpapakabanal or being holy? The teaching tells us that this is not true. This is not true. Why? First, the call. What do we mean? What do we mean by the call? In the story of Zacchaeus that we will see later, you will see that God initiates the encounter. So he makes the first move. Hinahanap niya tayo. Wherever we may be, kahit di natin siya hinahanap, or maybe we're looking in the wrong direction, God initiates the encounter or the first move. God deals with us in our own unique way, no? Iba-ibang tao, iba-ibang klase ng pagtawag sa atin. And God leaves us the free will to respond to His initiative. So, hindi namimilit si Lord. But, He's always there. He deals with us in our own unique way. And, yun nga, He's waiting for us to say yes. No? If you can remember yung picture ni Jesus na He's knocking on the door, pero the door does not have a doorknob outside. The door can only be opened from the inside. Yun yung magandang picture eh. Are we going to let Jesus in our hearts and in our lives or not? So let's look at the video, short video on Zacchaeus and how he was called to holiness.
In ye olde Bible times, in a little old town called Jericho, there lived a bad dude named Zacchaeus, or Zach for short. He was a greedy tax collector. He cheated people out of their own money and didn't even give it back to them. Everyone thought he was a total bozo. On this particular day, Jesus came to town. It was pretty exciting because people had heard about the epic things Jesus had been doing. He was kind of like a famous celebrity, and people were hoping maybe Jesus would speak to them, say hi, or even pump out a few miracles.
Hey, JC, I've got a spare couch you can sleep on. If you need somewhere to stay. I don't know, dude.
Zach wanted to see Jesus too, but because Zach was short, he could only see Jesus from up in a tree.
Zacchaeus, I'm gonna come stay at your house today.
Oh, not Zacchaeus. Stay at my place. We made brownies.
Maybe it was something Jesus said that day. Or maybe it was just the fact that Jesus himself chose to stay at Zach's house. But something changed inside of Zach, and he decided to believe in Jesus and start being a better bloke too.
But Zacchaeus, he's a sinner. Don't stay at his place, dude.
No way. Sinner.
I came to earth to save sinners. And today, my friend Zacchaeus has found life. Salvation!
And I've decided to give away half of my stuff to the poor. And I'll pay back all the money I cheated from you guys, and I'll pay it back times 4.
You're a poet and you didn't even know it.
Even though Zach was a bit of a bad dude, Jesus forgave him, loved him, and invited him to be his mate. The end.
So that's how Zacchaeus was called by Jesus. No? It's a very inspiring story of Jesus looking up the tree and seeing Zacchaeus na umakyat doon kasi nga maliit siya, hindi niya makita si Jesus, so umakyat siya sa puno. So, 'di ba, gumawa din ng paraan si Zacchaeus. And then nakita 'yun ni Jesus. So, hindi natin alam kung, 'di ba, parang napaka-unlikely na makikita mo yung mga tao sa puno, yung mga ganun, when you're walking, 'di ba? And maraming taong nakapaligid sa iyo. So, that's just one of the great examples of how God calls us. We are called differently, and siya yung tumatawag sa atin. Now, this is another story, but this is about Saint Ignatius of Loyola. So let's there's been a movie about him, but this one is a shorter one, like medyo cartoonish din siya, but it tells us about the person, the saint, the holy person who taught us the consciousness exam. So let's watch this.
Oh, hey. Yeah, that's right. Talking Olive. What you might call an attempt at making the next 10 minutes a lighthearted journey for all. So I'm a stuffed Spanish olive. I grew up in California, but I take my heritage pretty seriously. You could say that my motivation stems from the deep Spanish roots of my family tree. Anyway, for culture, beauty, and outright influence in the shape of the world as we know it, Spain enjoys its share. Cervantes, Picasso, conquistadors, Sherry, St. Ignatius of Loyola, paella. Ooh, wait, go back one. No, not the paella. Ah, I know what you're thinking. Awesome! A happening profile of a saint. Well, Ignatius didn't start off as a saint. As a matter of fact, you could say that he took the scenic route to sainthood. Well, here we are, the castle of Loyola in northern Spain, birthplace of St. Ignatius. Not the humble beginnings one might imagine for a saint. In 1491, Inigo Lopez de Loyola was born into a family of minor nobility. At age 13, he was sent to live with Juan Velasquez, a family friend, who also happened to be a treasurer in the court of Ferdinand and Isabella. Ignatius the young courtier developed grand visions of chivalry and battlefield glory. He took great care of and pride in his physical appearance and was no stranger to the ladies. In addition to walking around town wearing a sword, he was known to drink, gamble, and even brawl. Yup, he was about as far from a saint as you'd like to get, but hey, he's young. There's still time. By his late 20s, Ignatius found direction and purpose as a respected army officer. Though he was a dedicated and courageous soldier, his lifestyle stayed the same, and his motivation still leaned toward the vain and glorified. Funny enough that it was his appetite for glory that would change his life. Pamplona, May 21st, 1521. Outnumbered 13-1 and encouraged by Ignatius, Mayor Miguel Herrera chooses to fight rather than surrender Pamplona to invading French forces. 6 hours into the futile battle, Ignatius, leading the effort, is struck by a cannonball that rips open his left calf and shatters his right shin. With their larger-than-life champion gravely wounded, the Spanish troops lose their spirit and surrender. The French were so impressed with Ignatius' skill and bravery that they treated his wounds and carried him home to Loyola.
Sorry.
This is where things get ugly. Doctors had to re-break and reset Ignatius' leg. After it healed, a protruding bone created a lump, which did not agree with Ignatius' vanity. He had the extra bones sawn off, and the shortened legs stretched out with weights. Since the state of medicine in 1521 was soaked rags and rusty saws, and television was a good 450 years off, Ignatius began a very long, painful, and boring recovery. To pass the time, Ignatius read the only two books in the house, The Life of Christ and The Lives of the Saints. Not his first choice by far, but better than nothing. Gradually, though, as he reflected for days and months on end upon what he was reading, the thoughts and desires that had always motivated Ignatius were being challenged by an increasing desire to serve Christ in some meaningful way. With his wounds healed, and after a lot of contemplation on his place in the world, and against his family's protests, Ignatius turns away from a life of wealth, excitement, and nobility, and decides to travel to the Holy Land to serve pilgrims there. He sets out for the sanctuary at Montserrat, where he confesses his sins for 3 days, leaves his sword at the altar of the Black Madonna, and trades his fancy clothes for those of a beggar. A penniless drifter, Ignatius finds shelter in a cave in the nearby town of Manresa. Though he has confessed his sins, he struggles with his own humanity, his relationship with God, his ultimate role. Over the course of the next year, as Ignatius meditates on these things, he jots down reflections on his prayer experiences. These notes become the basis for the spiritual exercises, which have allowed millions of people to better understand themselves, each other, and their relationship with God for over 500 years. But that's a whole different video. Though he lived with hunger, sickness, and uncertainty throughout his time in Manresa, Ignatius was realizing life-altering truths, the greatest of which came as he rested on the banks of the Cardinal River one afternoon. Staring into the water, he was overcome by an understanding that God was in all things, and that his presence wasn't confined to buildings or ceremonies. This great revelation of the dynamic nature and presence of God in everyday life would be a major founding principle of the Jesuits. More importantly, it motivates Ignatius to stop living in a cave and get going to the Holy Land. By way of Barcelona and Venice, Ignatius lands in the port of Jaffa in August of 1523, and after a short time in Jerusalem, he's sent right back by the Franciscans. They didn't want to be responsible for the safety of a pilgrim do-gooder wandering around an inhospitable city. Back in Spain, Ignatius began to counsel others in the basics of his spiritual exercises. But the Inquisition was on, and the authorities weren't thrilled with a layman teaching his original concepts. Though eventually set free, he was barred from preaching until he secured some credentials, by way of an advanced university degree. See where this is going? Well, Ignatius' childhood education left something to be desired, namely Latin. So, starting from scratch, 33-year-old Ignatius swallowed his pride and enrolled himself in classes with little kids and teenagers. After 2 years of being the only student with a beard, Ignatius was ready for college. He got into trouble again at the University of Alcala and was jailed, after which he went to the University of Salamanca. Sort of. Tired of the harassment and lost in the inflexible education structure of Spanish institutions at the time, Ignatius headed off to Paris. At the U of Paris, Ignatius found an entirely different educational experience that stressed progressively building knowledge and active participation throughout a course of study. He also finds like-minded individuals like Francis Xavier and Peter Faber. After completing his studies and being ordained, Ignatius and a handful of buddies set up in Rome. Since the Holy Land was off limits, they decided that the best way to serve would be to form a community at the disposal of the Pope. Though they had never intended on forming an organized group, on September 27, 1540, Pope Paul III gave formal approval to the brandy new order of the Society of Jesus. But there was a lot of work to be done, and with only 10 members, the Jesuits knew they would need greater numbers to have a meaningful impact on the world. Knowing the importance of a solid education, Ignatius and the Jesuits opened schools in Europe and Asia to instruct young recruits. By 1548, 10 colleges were turning out hundreds of highly educated young men, and the public took notice. It wasn't long before the Jesuits were asked to open schools for everyone, something they had never anticipated. From then on, the number of Jesuits soared, and Ignatius worked like a dog, setting up schools and universities all over the world. So here we are, 28 Jesuit colleges and universities in the United States alone, where students study philosophy, law, medicine, theology, business, film, engineering, you name it. The scope of disciplines reaches back to a letter Ignatius wrote in 1551, stating that those who are now merely students in time will depart to play diverse roles. Their good education in life and doctrine will be beneficial to many others, with the fruit expanding more widely every day. Jesuit institutions require students to look beyond themselves and to participate in a world that could benefit from their talents. So, wondering where you fit into this picture? Segue! Whether a student, professor, or staff member, you're a part of a unique tradition in education that values critical thinking, social responsibility, and personal development for the betterment of all humankind. This isn't just a place to study, teach, or work. It's a state of being that is constantly evolving in concert with the world of which it is part. Well, folks, that's the whole story in a nutshell, as told by a small green fruit. You've got a lot to think about, and I've got a bull to fight. Hey, it's a cartoon. I can do anything I want.
All right. So, we have heard about the and seen, no, about the life of Saint Ignatius of Loyola. So, unconventional din yung pagkakatawag sa kanya, di ba? Like Zacchaeus, he was also, hindi siya yung usual profile ng holy man na maiisip natin, di ba? Okay. But he was called to holiness, and his yung response niya sa call ni God, we see it even until today, because we have Jesuit schools. Alam natin yung Ateneo, Xavier, 'di ba? And did you know that our spiritual director, Father Herb Schneider, is a Jesuit, no? So even sa BCBP, na nagre-reverb pa rin yung sinimulan ni Saint Ignatius of Loyola as a response to God's call to him. So now we go to the historical perspective. Quickly lang, yung bang mundo, is it good or bad? Parang, oo, tatawagin tayo ni God, diba, to holiness. Pero paano naman tayo ngayon na mahirap magpakabanal kapag ang mundo ay sa tingin natin masama, diba? So, ano ba ang role natin sa mundo ngayon? Nung unang panahon, nung time ng first Christians, they lived in as an apostolic community. So, 'di ba, nag-share sila, binenta nila yung mga resources nila, yung mga property nila, tapos shinare nila dun sa community, tapos each one were accorded whatever they needed, no? Like hindi siya equal distribution, basta meron silang sistema of determining who needs the resources more. Yan. And every member was a likely candidate for martyrdom. Kasi nung panahong yun din, ay maraming persecution kasi the Christian faith was just, starting out. So, ang tingin pa nga ng mga Romano noon ay kulto ang Christianity nung time na yon. And then, centuries later, we see the monastic life, no, being attractive to people, na wala nang masyadong persecution because the Roman Empire has adopted the Christianity as its religion. But the world was conquering them that time. So, maalala natin dyan, sina Saint Benedict, sina Saint Augustine, di ba? Yan. Yung mga gustong magpakabanal, they lived like hermits. Yung mga ermitanyo, talagang parang si Saint Ignatius, nagkulong sila sa mga kuweba, no? And they went to deserts or mga kumbento na malayo sa kabihasnan. They lived in monasteries, 'di ba? Para maging separate sila sa world. The prevailing thought then was that God can only be found in the chapel or monastery. So, pero as the years went by, centuries went by, nagkaroon ng mga semi-monastic or mendicant communities. Ito yung mga nagkaroon kasi ng maraming tao, 'di ba? Like may rapid urbanization, nag-develop yung system ng money, and nagkaroon ng mga bansa-bansa. Anong nangyari dito? Nagkaroon ng mga order like Franciscans, Dominicans, Agustinians, and the Carmelites, and may kanya-kanya silang mga purpose, no? Meron diyang mga nagtayo ng schools, merong mga nagtayo ng mga orphanage, no? Ang prevailing thought that time was people can discover God in the chapel or monastery and share their discovery of God to others. So through the schools, to the orphanage, to the hospitals, 'di ba? Now, may nagkaroon na tayo ng apostolic communities or contemplatives in action. So ito na yung after the Reformation, ito na yung na-form yung Catholic counter-revolution to answer the Protestant Reformation. So mga katulad ni Saint Ignatius, kasi 1500s din yan nangyari. Merong pagbabago ng yung kung paano nililive out yung spiritual life, no? Yung prayers and all, kailangan mag-spring din into action. So isa diyan si Saint Ignatius of Loyola na nag-introduce nung spiritual exercises niya na na-discover niya habang nagre-reflect siya for a year doon sa cave. So dito naman people, no, the doctors of the church and the religious are teaching us that we can find God in the world, no? Ngayon, age of laity na tayo. So mga 500 years after, 'di ba? It started with the Vatican in 1962 to 1965 in Vatican II, no? Ngayon yung role ng laity mas na-pronounce after this council. So the age of the laity, dito sinasabi sa atin, the laity and religious are equal before God, with the church like a body with different parts. So iba-iba lang tayo ng role, hindi mas mataas ang mga pare. Of course, we give them the respect, no? But we have different roles to play, no? And holiness is not exclusive to the religious. As the laity, we work from within ourselves, 'di ba? Nagkakaroon tayo ng mga personal encounters with God. We seek God in our workplace, in our temporal affairs, no? So kasi kung nasaan ba tayo, like kung nagtatrabaho ka sa government, we seek God in that environment and illumine Him to others. Yun yung task natin bilang Christians. Do people see that we are Christians? Do people see that we are happy being Christians? 'Di ba? Nakaka-attract ba tayo ng ibang tao sa pagiging Kristiyano? Our ideal is to witness to others. So yun nga, sa pamamagitan ng pamumuhay natin, dapat nagiging witness tayo. Hindi natin kailangang magpakain sa leon or magpapako sa krus katulad ng mga early Christians when they became witness, no, to the faith, to the great faith in Jesus. Ngayon, in our world today, we have to witness to others through our lives, how we live our lives. Yan, kasi we are martyred when we witness, no? Being a martyr and witness, no? Yun pala yung ibig sabihin nun. Yung ibig sabihin ng pagiging martyr is to be a witness or maging testigo na may patunay tayo, may mga patotoo tayo sa pamamagitan ng ating pamumuhay. So how do we find God in the marketplace? So, ang question lang is, how do we know someone? No? How do we know someone kung hindi natin siya kilala? When we encounter a person, how do we know? When we encounter God, how do we know that it is really God? 'Di ba? Minsan ang hirap, 'di ba? Isipin kung ito ba ay gawa ng Diyos or hindi. So, ang sagot lang diyan simple is prayer, no? At ang prayer ay it's a communication between two persons. Kaya dito sa BCBP, it's very important that we form the habit of regular prayer. May regular hour na tinuturo sa atin. And to stick to that habit. And this one, aside from the regularity of prayer, is we should learn how to communicate with God. Hindi yung tayo lang yung salita ng salita. We need to, be able to listen to God as well. Because through prayer, we open our heart and mind to God in love. No? Kasi nga, nagko-communicate tayo. Ino-open natin. We cannot pray if we don't open our hearts and minds to Him. So yung consciousness examine, ito na yung part 3 ng talk, no? So malapit nang matapos yung talk na to. Ito bang consciousness examine, is it soul scraping or self-blame? Naghahanap ba tayo ng fault sa sarili natin? Or is it an exercise in sensitivity training? Yan, di ba? So ano ba yung consciousness examine or conscious examine or daily examine as the Jesuits call it? Ito yung mga di-discover natin. Number 1, we can see how God works in our day-to-day activities. Number 2, paano ba tayo nagre-respond sa love ni God, shown by God Himself or others around us. And then is to confess to the Lord our sins arising from negative response to God's love and to ask for forgiveness from others that we have wronged. Through the conscious examine, we're able to thank God for touching us during this day, during that time. And we are able to meditate on how God touched us directly or how to thank others, that we may grow in knowledge how God touches people. And to be transformed to become the person who prays and be conscious of the presence of God every moment of the day. Kung matatandaan nyo dun sa video about Saint Ignatius of Loyola, may pinakitang sunflower, di ba? Doon nakita kasi ni Saint Ignatius na we can find God in everyday situations and we can find God anywhere. The wisdom of, how the sunflower is structured, na napaka-intricate, no? And even our bodies, na lahat sila interconnected and they have their own roles, di ba? Na parang there should be someone na nagmamaniobra sa lahat ng yan. And through every creature that God has created, we can see God. We can see God. God is not just in the church or monastery. He is everywhere. Ngayon, with a consciousness examine, these are the steps which I would like to encourage everyone in the action group to take note and to really try to follow it every day. So this is done before you end your day. Wag yung super antok na kayo because this will involve reflection talaga. It would be best if you have a journal or a notebook to accompany you. So step 1 is quiet down and be aware of God's presence. So kaya usually during bedtime ito, you pick a place and you can put on some music if that helps you to be aware of God's presence. If you have a prayer room in your house, that's good, no? So you may repeat the words when you start calming down or quieting down is, be still and know that I am God. You may repeat that. Be still and know that I am God. Slowly. You can repeat that 3 times. And then invite God to walk with you. So through this, in this step, you review the day from your last prayer time up to the present. So if this is your first time to do it, just make it simple. Just review the day. Anong nangyari today from the time na nagising ako hanggang ngayon. No? Ano ba yung, syempre ang maalala mo dyan, yung mga major mong ginawa. Then note and meditate on the times that God touched you and loved you directly or through others. Like, halimbawa, God touches you through consoling and through the fruits of the Holy Spirit, no? So, halimbawa, noong itong araw na 'to, napansin mo na hindi masyadong uminit yung ulo mo, kahit meron kang stuff na medyo matigas ang ulo, 'di ba? So, is that God touching you and letting you feel His love for you, 'di ba? Kasi 'pag uminit ang ulo natin, 'di ba tataas ang presyon, kakasakit ka, mase-stress ka pa, 'di ba? So that's just one of the examples, no? So, when you are reviewing your day, you look at when God touched you, no? And was able to express, or you were able to feel the love of God. And then note and meditate how you responded to God's love. So, ikaw ba ay nung napansin mo na hindi ka masyadong nagalit, nainis ka ba lalo, or nagpasalamat ka ba kay Lord, or wala lang? 'Di ba? Na parang, dumaan lang 'yun. Yung gano'n, 'di ba? So, okay lang 'yun. I mean, sabi nga, this is not fault finding. You are not supposed to be, to be burdened by what you did not do and what you did. This is an exercise on you being more aware of things happening to you. So sa simula siguro ma-bog down ka na, "Ay bakit nga ba hindi ko pinansin?" Mga gano'n, 'di ba? Pero over time, through this exercise, you'll be able to be in touch more, and you'll be able to detect more, 'di ba, God's presence. So yung second part is thank God, no, for accompanying you in your review, no, and for accompanying you in the day, during the day. Na Lord, I thank you kasi tinulungan mo ako makontrol yung emotions ko kanina, hindi ako masyadong nagalit, hindi ako sumigaw. Thank you for that kasi alam ko tini-take care mo ko. And then continue with your normal prayer patterns. 'Di ba? So, kung nagro-rosaryo ka before you go to sleep, then you can resume that. Or if you read the Bible after before you go to sleep, ganun din, no? So, you continue with your normal prayer patterns and you journalize your experience. Ito yung importante. Kasi when you journalize your experience, no, makikita mo, pag binalikan mo, ay, ang galing pala ni Lord na ilang araw na niya akong bini-build up or pinoprotektahan sa ganito. Alam mo yung mga gano'n? Hindi mo kasi siya makikita kung hindi mo siya sinusulat, no? Whether you do it digitally or yung old style, may notebook ka and paper and pen, 'di ba? 'Yon. Journalize your experience, maganda 'yan. And be consistent and do this daily. Kaya sabi nga, this is a daily examen or a consciousness exam. So, you can rewind this video para you can see the first part and then the second part. So, what's left now is for you to apply this teaching. So you can discuss this among yourselves in your action group meeting. If you need clarifications for some of these steps, there's a lot of resources on the web, but of course, you can also ask us in the teaching ministry and in the formation directory. So yun lang po. We hope that you'll be able to do this consistently and daily as part of your journey to to become a better Christian. So that's all. Thank you very much and God bless.